such a pleasure to have this conversation with them because these are two leaders who have seen, experienced, made that change happen. You guys have been involved in this journey from the very start. It used to be called something else, global captives, if I'm not wrong, right, at that point in time. So you have been involved right from the start. So Gunjan, let me start with you. You know, what was that strategic inflection point where you felt that this can be a completely different story?
A very, very warm hello to all of you, and thank you for hosting us, Debjani and the team from nasscom. Just to step back for a minute and share some bit. When I was interviewing at Goldman Sachs and looking to return back to India, I actually held back for many weeks because I wanted to be an individual contributor. and little did I know that 13 years into it, the roles will evolve so much. But there is an aspect about what I want to highlight there, which is the mindset has never been about the size of the organization or the number of people that we have. Yes, of course, it is about the execution capabilities that we provide from our offices to the firm, but it is so much about the individual capabilities, the individual USP that we each carry, that we each bring in transforming our businesses front to back. And the pivotal points that you mentioned, Debjani, started as I relocated in us thinking about building strats or quants or people who apply mathematics and statistics to finance. At that time, it felt business as usual. It didn't feel that it's an inflection point. Only now, when you look back in perspective, in hindsight, that it feels like it was a deep inflection point for us. The second inflection point that I feel came to perhaps many of us was the continuity of the businesses that we were able to support and prosecute in the middle of COVID. And it was an inflection point not just for individual companies, but it was an inflection point for this story of GCCs. I have seen the discussions in the boardrooms and a range of these conversations with the board members, with the CEOs of different clients of the firm, including our own, evolve on the back of what our country was able to pull out in the middle of COVID. And so to all of us, it was an incredible story of resilience of our people and a determined support from the policymakers, the industry bodies, and a tremendous validation of the infrastructure of our country that stood the test of times across cities and villages pan-India. And so with all that behind us, we will get perhaps deeper into this conversation. Now that we have arrived here, where do we go from here? And so I'm looking forward to that part of the conversation as we move along.
We will come to that. Sunil, your perspective, anything you want to add to what Gunjan said? I talked about, can we aspire to be the nerve centers? What you have achieved, when I look at your story, I think you've got very close to that. So maybe you want to share a little bit about that journey and what were some of those key moments or decisions that you took which changed the game for you?
Yeah, thank you, Debjani, for this, and very nice to be here with this audience. And it's great to see a GCC-focused conference, which sort of elevates the importance and the impact that GCCs have been doing in India for the last couple of decades. I think I'll just probably give one or two quick examples of pivot points. When I joined my current company, Rakuten, about 8 years ago, it's a Japanese conglomerate, one of the largest tech companies, tech-based digital businesses in Japan and global. We were about 50 people 8 years ago, right? Now we are 4,000 to 5,000 employees. I think there were several sort of forces that drove scale for us. One was a technology-driven transformation, right? As a company with very diverse businesses from commerce to fintech and banking and so on, it became very clear to us that deep tech, data sciences, customer analytics, information sciences, AI, sort of will drive the business for us, right? So they're not just an enabler of business, but technology is the business, right? Cross sales, forecasting revenue, forecasting risk, solving for fraud, anything and everything had to do with that. And I think India, in the last 6 or 7 years, with the not only understanding of our business context, global business context, right? We've got employees who worked in e-commerce company globally. We've got employees who worked in e-commerce in India, in Flipkart and Amazon and so on. So because of the deep understanding of the business context and a natural gravitation and skill sets in data sciences and analytics that goes all the way back to the history of India in math, I think there was a natural fit for us in sort of pivoting to a point where, we hired about 2,000 data scientists and engineers. So that was one pivot. Also, second pivot, and particularly because we are not necessarily an American company, but a Japanese company, is that the cultural melting of the minds and hearts, is a process, right? I mean, because there are natural strengths that we as Indians have, there are natural strengths that Japanese have from their long and rich history. And sort of getting them to a complementary stage where sort of it's additive or accretive in value also played a big part in an exponential growth for us.
You need to take a masterclass on how you were able to do that. I think that's one of the biggest challenges, especially with Japanese and also a few other companies that we see.
Yeah. I mean, I'd be happy to share more in the next session.
So, I asked the question, is this it? Have we really achieved the pinnacle of success? Because everyone's talking about that and everyone's saying how great the India GCC story is. So how do you guys see it? If let's forget 2047, but even if you look at the next 10 years, right? Is this it? Or is it going to be incremental growth of what we have already achieved? Or is there some radical opportunity out there that can bring in the next big disruption?
I think I'll give that answer in the context of at least our industry and our firm. It's a financial institution that I work for. And my view is it took us some time to build the business context. It took us some time to build the deep connect into each of the businesses, into each of the functions across all the entities of the firm around the world. It took us some to bring the culture of the firm, a 154-year-old company, into India, and to harmonize in a way that our offices are any other offices of the firm. They just so happen to be in India. And now that we have come here, to me, it is both an opportunity to dramatically scale out with the macro of the environment of Gen AI and everything else that is going around there, but also to capitalize on an organic leadership that has been built ground up in allowing for lifting the lid on what our offices can continue to contribute deeply into a global financial services organization. I will acknowledge, for a long period of time, I have never allowed anyone in our offices to call us as GCCs. We don't use that terminology. In fact, in hosting many board members of different clients and different C-level executives, I actually stopped them many times if they ever referred to our offices or offices like what we have built in India or what their companies have built here as captive sites.
What do you call them?
And never allow them to be used as captive sites. It's such a colonial term to talk about a wrapper of the ambition of thousands of people or millions of people who work in this industry. And so we are front to back businesses of Goldman Sachs with deep engineering capabilities. That's who we are. We have roles in sales, in trading, in portfolio management, in wealth management, in research, in banking, in financing, with deep engagement of strats, quants, and engineers into each of our businesses. That's who we are. And I'll talk about Gen AI as we move along in the potential of the transformation at a non-linear scale from here on. But I'm very keen to hear what your identity is, Sunil. When I say your, I'm talking about Rakuten.
Thank you, Gunjan. I think to start with Debjani's question about have we reached the pinnacle or reached the peak of the evolution in GCCs, my broad answer is, I mean, we are just in the beginning stages, right? And the reason is, we and I personally have had an exploratory mindset or a day one mindset even today, right? Even though I've been there for 8+ years. And we have constantly pushed the boundaries of who we are and what value we bring to the table, right? In other words, that the definition itself has morphed in the last 8 years. I'll give you 2 specific examples. The first way we stretched the contours of what a GCC means, of course, we started off as a technology center, right? We've got great talent, very tech-savvy engineers, building for the global businesses. We reached a point in one of our businesses, and this is a specific example. So there's a business we have called Rakuten Payments, which is like the PhonePe or Google Pay of Japan, right? We are the #1 payments company amongst our 70 businesses. Now, just based on the tech transformations that needed to be done. It was an in-house solution. We had to just scale up for massive scale. We had about 1 or 2 million users initially. Now it's like, 20, 30, 40 million users, huge traffic. So by just the gravitational force of the India team, building for that scale, resilience, availability, and so on. Over time, the entire product, business, team, strategy, engineering, everything moved to India, unknowing, not necessarily having planned for it. And then I was having a discussion with our board, and and 1 year later, I said, do you realize that the #1 and the #2 payment companies in Japan, which is about 85% of market share, the entire team operates from India. Only the business happens to be in Japan. And he's like, okay, I know #1, it's us, your team is there, which is #2. #2, they were thinking was a Japanese company called PayPay, which is actually Paytm sitting in Delhi, right? And they were really shocked. Clearly, they didn't, this characterization that it just became a market for 2 products that were completely run from outside of Japan was a transformational mindset shift in the first place. Right? So that was one pivot, where I feel that, to your point, we've got to continuously try different things and then expand the contours. The second example I can give is, see, we went through a personal journey or reflection on, we have built all these amazing technology from our Bangalore office for global businesses, right? Everything from security to AI to cloud products, deep data sciences, system architecture for scale, cloud transformation, so on and so forth. And we said, look, there are companies that have gone journey of externalizing their technology, because if it's good enough for as large a company as Rakuten, it's good enough to be taken to the market. So we actually went to the board of Rakuten Inc. and said, hey, we just took about 2 or 3 of our product portfolios. One of them is in the observability space, right? AI-enabled observability. And we said, this is adopted in 24 companies within Rakuten. We would like to take this external. We'll try it in the India market, make a business for it, and then take it global. It was a very hard sort of back and forth because they were not necessarily used to transforming. It's a B2C company. How do you transform this to a B2B company? But anyway, we won the argument that day, and then we incubated this, created a business. And I'm happy to say that it's a multi-million-dollar business running from our Bangalore center now, where Rakuten 6sense, which is the product that we built, is not only adopted by about 36 companies in India, in airlines and government and defense and so on and so forth, but we also sold it to North America and Chile and so on and so forth.
And this was designed, conceptualized, designed, pitched by you to the company.
Absolutely.
This was not the company asking you to do something.
Absolutely, absolutely. And that, again, comes from this, it depends on the culture, right? If you're passionate about continuous value addition, continuous growth, continuous transformation, systemically, then you're not going to stop at what you did last year.
absolutely, and that's where I want to go to, right? I talked about the three things, and if you all have another one to add, do, but talent, technology, and leadership, and how all three have to come together to shape the roadmap, the road ahead, right? I'll leave talent aside because a lot will be said on talent over the next 2 days and we have limited time. But I do want to touch on technology and leadership. I'll start with tech first. The disruption that AI is bringing on us, the real disruption, sector by sector, the potential to get disrupted. What is the opportunity for GCCs that you see? And how can we differentiate? Like, how does GCCs make or leverage AI as a competitive advantage? What do we do? So thoughts on that, either of you, whoever wants to start.
Look, firstly, it's still evolving, and it's evolving at a significantly non-linear curve. From enterprise perspective in GCCs, I think the focus should not be more on the foundational models. You should just expect that the foundational models are those of really big players of sizable capabilities that have access to hundreds of thousands of GPUs, and perhaps India as a country, as we were talking about it, Debjani should be investing in the foundational model. From a GCC perspective, it's about taking the foundational models and then thinking about what are the domain-specific products, domain-specific transformations that can be enabled on top of our businesses. At our firm, we are thinking about a significant elevation of Gen AI across each of our businesses. A lot of it will be delivered from our engineers, but also non-engineers who are seated in each of our front-to-back teams here, which means there is a significant element of organizational change management that we have to go through. Organizational change management also means what is the lid of the thinking that the leaders are going through in framing what is a Gen AI-enabled simulation of their respective businesses is. And in there, the partnership with the ecosystem is critical. The ecosystem is, we typically operate GCCs serving the different entities of the firm, for sure. But there is an aspect of working and partnering among different companies within the GCC ecosystem that is critical, including with the hyperscalers, including with the tech risk companies, including with a range of local domestic companies that has to come to bear to help in transforming that set of businesses that each of our companies represent. And I'll just close by saying that each industry's imperative is different. Ours is a heavily regulated, governed industry with different regulations in different jurisdictions that we operate in. And yet, the ability for the GCCs in the banking industry or regulated industries to have a bird's eye view on what are the regulations that are applicable to each geography is unique, is absolutely unique, because our partners in US are thinking about what is happening in US. Our partners in Europe are thinking what is happening in Europe. Here, we have an eye view of what is happening in the world and being able to design solutions that are applicable to each of those geographies, but harmonize around what are the common denominators of what is acceptable in the world. And so it's a generational opportunity right in front of us.
Sunil, you have, I'm aware of the work that Sunil does, and I think you guys are already at the cutting edge of AI in terms of a lot of the work that you're doing, right? What's the next big thing that excites you?
In general, in AI or in the context of India and
AI.
Yeah. See, I think that while a lot of the focus is on sort of the general purpose LLMs and foundational models that are being launched in the world, just because of how frequently they're launching and the buzz around it, and all the cool stuff, which is all worth it, by the way, right? OpenAI and Meta and all of them. What I'm excited about is two things. One is that the potential that these models will unlock. I mean, this is to me the equivalent of the internet being invented, right? And thanks to the founders of the internet, they made it free for the rest of the. Imagine if somebody charged for the internet to be used, right? TCP IP stack, 20 seconds per API, 20 cents per API call. I mean, there's no way we would have all reached this point. So I see AI becoming pretty much the same, right? At some point in the future, already GPT-4o is half the cost of GPT-4, right? So this sort of 10x growth in capabilities is always going to be attached to a 10x reduction in cost. And it's going to reach a point of marginal cost, or pretty much free, right? It's just data in, data out. So that's going to just absolutely be a game changer for me, right? I mean, you see what is happening, and I'll tell you, it is so transformational, particularly the things that I'm seeing in education sector, right? Somebody, actually a student, an avatar is teaching a student, an avatar of a teacher. The student writes the Einstein's formula, shows it to the camera, and the camera says, oops, that's wrong. You have written E equals MC cube, right? Are you sure it's right? I mean, just complete. Imagine a student in a tier 2 or a tier 3 city, somewhere in India or Vietnam or wherever it is, being taught by a Nobel laureate like Milton Friedman in his avatar teaching economics to them, right? Imagine the potential of what it can unlock. Extremely excited. Second, I feel LLMs are one slice. One of the things that we are ourselves grappling with or solving for is, while the capability of an LLM is important, natural language processing, to us, it's going to become as fundamental as each another human-computer interaction, right? Conversational AI is the new keyboard of this century, which means it's no longer a fancy UX, but almost anybody, any application that's going to be launched, any business, is going to get a conversational UI plugged in by default, right? Which can summarize things, which can act like a human, which can bring the human touch. Now the question becomes, is an LLM really needed, right? If I'm an e-commerce business, if I'm healthcare, if I'm doing IT ops, I think the possibility for SLMs, and this has implications for India as well, where I don't need a 10,000 GPU farm where I have to spend $500 million. These days, people have already built SLMs that can run on CPUs. Yeah, you can train it on a GPU, but on a day-to-day basis, a CPU is good enough. Because I'm not going to ask a healthcare application what is happening between Israel and Palestine, right? That information is not needed at all.
Absolutely.
So I think SLMs, context-specific LLMs, embedded AI in your refrigerator, right? There's going to be Gen AI. It just needs to know things about the food and the temperature. And that's going to be a few kilobytes of code. So I'm really, really excited about what's embedded AI going to do and things of that nature.
Right now, one of the biggest questions I get, especially when I talk to governments outside India, is where is the ROI, right? We are investing so much. Now, if you look at just US and some of the big tech companies, rough number, the estimates are anything between 70 to 85 billion that has been invested just last year, right, primarily in compute, but building these models. The question is, where is the investment? I mean, where's the ROI? What are those big use cases that you can solve to get the returns? And you'll have to pretty much hit a 200 billion revenue to even get the returns, right? And I think that's, in my opinion, that's where the opportunity is. You need someone to make AI real. You need someone to solve those problems where you start getting the returns. And I think that's a huge, because GCCs cut across sectors. If GCCs can become that engine of innovation that can start making AI real, sector by sector, and driving the actual disruption, we talk about disruption, but driving the actual disruption across sectors. A lot of it will be workflow automation. That's where the money is, right? I think that's a huge opportunity, again, for GCCs. Leadership.
May I just add, and if it's okay, I'm just going to go broader than GCCs in the context of this specific pointer. Goldman published one of the most groundbreaking research on the potential of Gen AI in terms of personal productivity and employee productivity over a tenor of 10 plus years out when there is mass adoption of Gen AI. And the mark that we are carrying is that it can add up to 10 to 15% to the world GDP. India alone can be a beneficiary of $1.2 to $1.5 trillion in incremental GDP enabled by Gen AI. And on an individual basis, in the context of an employee role, the view is that it can be 1.3 percentage point annualized for a decade at the point that Gen AI technologies become mainstream. The world has not seen this kind of unlock in personal productivity since the personal computers came in 1990s. And since 1990s, the view about the marginal growth in productivity is just a very small fraction of the numbers that I just mentioned. So it is huge. And if I may just mention one more point, which is for the GCC, so I'm bringing it back to GCCs. For years, since this type of talent hubs have evolved in the companies to come in locations in India, there is this aspect of institutional knowledge that we have felt a barrier against, institutional knowledge. Ability to go and discover what was the context in which that document, that business decision, that code was written. How dramatically empowering it is at an individual level not to feel the barrier of what that institutional knowledge is, because it is so much discoverable in the context of what your learning ability is, and being able to get the full understanding of those aspects of the businesses, those documents, those artifacts, wherever they are, in whichever language it is written, in your vernacular.
Yeah. Two more questions that I have in mind, and I'm going to request you all for short answers because we are running out of time, so treat it as rapid fire. But let's talk leadership a bit, right? Because what got us till here is, again, not going to get us to the next pinnacle or next peak. If leadership has to change to drive this transformation that we think we should be going after the next few years, what are the three most important leadership capabilities that you think is needed for the road ahead? I'll start with you, Sunil.
Can I take a more sort of wider, expansive view, or
as long
specifically
as you can
GCC?
cover it in like 30 seconds.
Okay. I think it's more, okay, if I can summarize it, it's be in control of your destiny, right? Whether it's in the GCC context, having a very end-to-end view of what's going on in the business, what's going on in the company, what's going on in the technology, having a perspective of that, being able to connect the dots, will help build a very sustainable, long-term, very, very meaningful, impactful organization. And I mean the same thing for the whole AI conversation we were having, right? I mean, you look at what's going on right now. NVIDIA, Qualcomm, Intel in the US, manufacturing of all the AI chips happening in Taiwan, India, China, all in world. India has no option but to be end-to-end vertically integrated, right? The chips is where everything is. I mean, software part is much easier to build. The OpenAI stack, blah, 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 applications, all of that. So being in control of your destiny end-to-end is the primal sort of force that needs to be, taken hold of, whether it's inside an organization or as a country level. That would be my perspective.
Gunjan, your 30 seconds.
I'll say be commercial in whatever fractal of the role that one carries. Have the connect in the organization, in the industry, in the academia, so that the continuous context is the responsibility of the leader. And then last but not the least, be a culture carrier of the organization that you are in. The integration of these three, practiced on a continuous basis, is what typically lifts the lid for the entirety of the unit or for the teams or for the organizations that you're managing.
I would just, first of all, thank you both of you. This has been an excellent conversation. I hope you agree. I would just end by saying, I really believe that you have to reimagine your role in the organization, the GCC leadership teams. it is not just about leading the GCC or ensuring your GCC is successful. I think it is about thinking bigger in terms of your overall business and your overall business success, and how do you drive that? I think you all have worked so hard to come to where you are, and it's fantastic to see what you have shaped this sector into, this segment into. But miles to go before we sleep. Tremendous opportunities ahead, and would love to see where we are in the next 10 years. I think not just for global business success, but I also believe you will be absolutely crucial for India's success, for India's ability to truly transform into Viksit Bharat. The GCCs and the role you play is going to be absolutely crucial. So with that, thank you, Sunil.
May I just say, Debjani, thank you for what you do. I actually talk about NASSCOM and your role in how the government has become so much friendlier in the context of what is required to drive innovation. Does more need to be done? Of course. But when you have practitioners in the roles that you are in and with the voice that you carry, it makes a big difference. I'll mention you gave your talk that there was this article on Satya Nadella, would the next Satya Nadella be based in India? Like, the lifting of the lid would the next Microsoft be in India? And that's what we should be thinking.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that.